in. So I got asked by Mr. Andrew Chapman to sub today, so aren't y'all lucky? And I asked him what the topic was, and he said the paramis. So how many of you have been coming for the past couple weeks or... Yeah, okay, so some of you know, but for those of you who are like, what the heck are you talking about? I want to be able to give you a little bit of insight. So the paramis are this list, the 10 paramis, the 10 perfections, sometimes it's called. And it was this list that was made after the Buddha's death. Right, so we're going to keep that in mind. This list was made after the Buddha's death. Think about it this way. The Buddha died, and all of these big Buddhist leaders came together, and they were like, we should make a list of all the qualities of a Buddha. Right? So that's what this list is. It's all of the qualities of an enlightened being. And I want to remind you that these are not exclusive to enlightened beings. We think of them that way sometimes in this tradition, but what I want to offer is more of this list of perfections. It's more of, Ajahn Sucitto puts it great. He says, there are ways to cross the floods of life. Right? So these are skills that can be cultivated to cross the floods of life. Not just another thing for you to check off your box to know if you are enlightened or not. Got it? Yes, Maddie, I've got it. Good. So I'll run through what those are. So in order, we've got generosity, giving help and benefit to other living beings. And then, so that's one. The second one, which can get a little sticky, is morality and virtue, sometimes ethics. And I'm going to leave that one there because that one can be a little weird, right? And then we've got renunciation, renouncing worldly pleasures or letting go of some of the worldly pleasures. Anybody who's in recovery from addiction knows how powerful renunciation can be. Next, we have wisdom. And this is just achieving a right understanding. Seeing clearly is what I like to say. It's seeing clearly what's happening for what it is. Then we've got energy, which is persistent effort and not being discouraged by failures, which I like that particular definition a lot, because sometimes energy can be like, I gotta be like ready to go the whole time. And I like it more about having persistent effort and not being discouraged. I think that's really powerful. Then we have patience, which is patiently accepting life's ups and downs. It do be like that sometimes, right? Truthfulness, which is pretty self-explanatory. Honesty and truthfulness in all things. The next one can also get a little sticky, and that's resolve and determination. And particularly unwavering determination in progress of the path that we're taking here to be a better human, to show up in the world in a certain way. And it can get sticky because sometimes we can get a little clingy and it can turn into attachment to achievement instead of determination. I know that has happened for me many times, so just putting that out there. Then we have two more. We've got loving kindness, which is the good. That's showing benevolence and compassion to all things, including yourself. And lastly, equanimity, the granddaddy of them all. This is just balance, tranquility. Sometimes Mikey, our guiding teacher, will say equanimity is being unfuckwithable, right? And again, important to remember these qualities are not exclusive to enlightened beings, but they can be cultivated through practice and daily intention. And the good news today is we get to talk about patience, right? Everybody needs patience. I'm sure if I would have put that on the website, y'all would not have come. Because you're like, I don't need that. I don't need patience. I'll start with a little story. So yesterday, I played a show at the one and only Lipstick Lounge. I'm a bass player, and I've been playing with a lot of people lately, so my rig was in Old Hickory. Me and my bass were in East Nashville, and my load-in was at 4 p.m. So I had to drive to Old Hickory. I planned it out perfectly. I was going to drive to Old Hickory, get my stuff, come back home, clean up, look cool, and then head to Loden. And so I drive to Old Hickory, I get all my stuff, and I'm heading back towards East Nashville, and there is standstill traffic. So there's a bridge that separates like Madison and Old Hickory. And it's pretty much the only way in and out, right? And so I get to this bridge, and it is standstill traffic on this bridge. And this turned my 20-minute drive into a 45-minute drive. And it's funny because I was actually listening to talks on patience so that I could kind of prepare for this morning. And it's funny what happens to your brain, because my brain goes like, I'm going to be late for Loden. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose this gig. Oh my goodness, I'm not going to get to sound check. My monitor mix is going to be awful. Can this bridge even handle this many cars? Like, is this bridge going to fall down? Am I going to have to call a sub? Like, all this stuff starts coming through my head. And then I come back to the talks, and I'm listening, and I'm realizing it's an opportunity to practice. Instead of getting angry with every driver who decides to go super slow or is like jamming out instead of taking the turns, I'm like, oh, this is a good opportunity to practice. And so I bring that up because I know each and every one of you most likely has had a very similar experience throughout your life. You had somewhere to be, and the universe said, nah-uh. Said, we're going to take our time. And you said, I don't wanna. So I think it's a good setup for true patience, really understanding what patience is. So we're going to talk about what is true patience, why do we want to cultivate it, number one, and number two, how do we cultivate it? Pretty straightforward. So when I say the word patience, right, even after telling a story, when I say the word patience, what is the first like quick thought or word that comes to your mind? I'm curious, like honestly. Yell it out. Anxiety! Okay, what else? Sorry for yelling when you said anxiety. Discipline. That's a fun one. Suffering. What else did I hear? Long suffering and pain. Somebody say pain. Yeah. Patience is pain. That's going to be my next metal song. Slow. Yeah. I'm loving that y'all are being honest. Yeah. That's good. For me, it's always been this image comes to mind. Y'all were talking about pet peeves, right? Mine is mouth noises, specifically people chewing very loud. And for me, when I think of patience, it's always been this image of sitting across the table from someone who is just going to town, chewing with their mouth open. And patience is me not being reactive about it. It's me just sitting with this awful situation. That's what I think of when I think about patience. It's just like gritting your teeth like, oh, it's going to be over soon, right? Or like, how can I get out of this? What's the next exit I can take to go around this traffic? What table can I move to make sure I don't have to listen to them chewing loudly? Right, that's what I think of when I think of patience. It's kind of similar to maybe what y'all experience when you think of patience? I think so, based off of some of the words I heard. And if that was true patience, think about this. If that was true patience, wouldn't cultivating it be excruciating? If that was true patience, just gritting our teeth, hoping it's going to be over soon, wouldn't patience be like the worst to cultivate? Right? So something kind of tells me that this is a misconception. We think of patience as this like deep enduring, like this enduring discomfort and difficulty so I can increase my capacity for more discomfort and difficulty. When actually, patience is not that difficult to tap into. We're making it so much harder on ourselves. I like to think about it this way. So some of you who've been coming here know the 3 marks of existence. So basically the 3 things that tell you that you are living now, here in general, is that the world is imperfect. Life is imperfect. Life is impersonal, and life is impermanent. Right? Imperfect, impersonal, impermanent. These are the 3 marks, the 3 truths of existence. And so oftentimes we see patience as linked to impermanent, right? Somebody's chewing with their mouth open. I'm like, oh my gosh, this will be over soon. I'm just waiting for it to be done, right? Craving for it to be done. When in all actuality, true patience is deeply connected to the imperfect nature of life. I've heard different teachers translate the Pali for patience to the supreme perfection. And I wonder if this is the translation because of the deep connection to patience and letting go. To practice patience is to practice letting go of control and expectation so that reactivity doesn't arise as easily. Patience is not gritting your teeth, hoping it's going to be over soon, increasing your capacity to be annoyed. Instead, it's deeply knowing that I have no control over the traffic, that I have no control over how someone else chooses to chew their food, and that I can let go of my expectation that it should be the way that I think it should be. I can let go of this desire and discontent for the world. That's patience. Isn't that wild? And then through practicing that, we don't get as reactive, because when situations come up that would normally have us gritting our teeth, instead we say, I don't have control over this. This is dukkha. This is suffering. This is part of life. So why do we practice patience then? If it's so easy. And the reason I think I like to practice it is because it's an antidote to anger. Okay? Stick with me here. And oftentimes in these rooms you'll hear loving kindness is an antidote to anger and hatred. And it is. It's a great one. And patience as well. So how many of y'all are, you don't need to raise your hands, but I know a couple of y'all are in recovery, right? So I'll out myself here. So I just hit my 10-month sober birthday, very excited about it. And I noticed when I first got sober that I needed someplace to put my anger, because I was putting it on myself all the time. And it's funny, I never had road rage before I got sober. And then, now that I'm sober, man, I yell at everybody on the road. And it's so funny. And it comes out while I'm driving, and it's kind of seductive. And the more that I notice it, the more that I realize my inclination towards anger. So the more that I, kind of like dip my toe in while I'm driving, like, you're the worst, you suck, the more that judgment arises outside of the car. What one thinks and ponders upon becomes the inclination of the mind, and I drive a lot, right? So anger or hatred slowly poisons the mind. Anger is one of the 3 poisons of the mind. In Buddhism, we like lists. So those poisons are greed, hatred, and delusion. Anger being kind of synonymous with hatred. Not saying that we don't honor our anger, okay? This is not a spiritual bypassing moment. It's okay to honor our anger, but it's about not stewing in it, so that we can see clearly and respond wisely. Does that make sense? Because what ends up happening is, at least I notice this when I'm driving, the anger gets passed on into my body or into the community, or I get a little snippy with my wife, who then gets snippy with me, and then I go to the grocery store and I'm like kind of short with the clerk, or somebody cuts me off with their cart and takes the last cheese, you know? And I get like, it really does live. I'm not going to go into it today, but this is karma. This is karma. It's the effect our actions have and how it permeates throughout the experience of all beings. So part of you showing up here today shows me that you care about how you show up in the world. I don't think you'd be here if you didn't like care a little bit, right? Whether you're trying to make yourself less stressed, whether you're trying to learn how to deal with anxiety, whether you're trying to become enlightened, you showed up here because you want to be, for lack of a better phrase, a better version of yourself. Am I wrong? And that shows me that you want to be a better version of yourself so that the world slowly gets uplifted. You might not know that, but whether you know it or not, the action you're taking here today to show up shows me that you care about how you show up in the world. So knowing, putting it together, knowing that hatred is not supportive for ultimate peace, it's part of our contribution to making the world a better place by choosing to practice patience. Does that make sense? It's not necessarily our responsibility, but if we are truly wanting to show up in the world and contribute, patience is an important part of that because it lessens our anger. It's an antidote to reactivity. And it helps us show up in a way that is meaningful and in line with our values. Disclaimer. Again, anger, we're not trying to spiritually bypass. We're not trying to be like, I'm never angry, ever, because that's not how the world works, right? In fact, anger can be a really good litmus test for things that we care about. Like, I mean, bringing it up, all of us have social media. All of us see what's happening in other parts of the world. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it makes me really angry. Makes me really angry. And that's good news because it shows me I care about it, right? The important thing is for me to practice patience so that I don't act in anger if it is the motivator, but instead act in a way that is in alignment with clear seeing and wise responding. Act with tact. Not it? Because if we act with anger, it creates more anger. But anger is a solid motivator. Solid. So if you get angry about something, I'm not telling you to ignore it. I'm going to give you some tools to maybe step back so that you can see it clearly. Which brings us to how the heck do we practice this? That's really good information, but what do we do with it? So I'm going to read a excerpt from a book by Ajahn Sucitto, and the book is called Parami, a way for crossing life's floods, I think is the exact title. And so this is what he says about how we practice. He says, patience deals with checking emotional reactions, but it is not a denial of emotional intelligence. Patience has the gut knowledge that recognizes that a problem or pain is not something to run away from, get flustered by, or be self-pitying about. It has the wisdom to know that we have to prioritize the steps through which we can resolve suffering. It's true that it may be possible to find an alternative route to a destination. It may well be that more negotiations are needed to resolve the problem. It may be that there's a medicine that will ease the pain, but the first thing to do is not react, to not rage, despair, or mentally proliferate. Our first effort is to draw a line around the suffering. Take a step back and know, that's that. Then there's the effort to recollect that we can be free of the suffering, that we can let go, that we don't have to take suffering in and adopt it as final, real, and solid. After that initial recollection, we have the encouragement to investigate and then to draw out the hook that snags our hearts on the rough stuff of life. It takes practice to be able to check your emotional reactions, to be able to draw a line around your suffering in order to take a step back. So for this, I have personally found that concentration practice is really helpful. And what do I mean when I say concentration practice? This is anchoring, falling away, noticing, coming back. Right? So whether your anchor is the breath or color or the body or whatever, this concentration of I'm going to focus on this anchor and continue to come back to it. This is how we develop wisdom. And I don't know, how many of y'all are in therapy? Is anybody in therapy? We love therapy. Of course y'all are in therapy. So in therapy, you may have heard the term wise mind, right? So wise mind is this place in between emotion mind and rational mind. Emotion mind being like, wah, and rational mind being like, Wise mind is like the balance, the middle way here. And so when we cultivate wisdom, when we cultivate this concentration practice, what it does is it gives us a tool to be able to access our wise mind. So it gives us a tool to be able to zoom out. Without it, it's really hard to be like, oh, I'm tripping, right? So once we zoom out, once we use wisdom to zoom out and see like, okay, what's happening? What's the emotion? Compassion is the next step. Okay, so we see clearly, and then we respond wisely. So why compassion, do you think? It's because honoring our disappointment, honoring our anger is important, right? It wants to be seen. Again, we're not here to spiritually bypass. We're not here to never be angry. We're here to notice, okay, I'm angry because I'm disappointed that I'm not going to make load-in on time. And I can go into my heart and have some compassion, which is just the quivering of the heart in response to pain. I can have some compassion and be like, oh, that sucks. That's unpleasant. Okay. Now what? Right? See it for what it is. Honor it. Be like, okay, I'm disappointed. Disappointment is present. Mikey, our guiding teacher, also says it's almost like that feeling when you see a kid drop their ice cream cone. It's like, oh, it's like, little bunny, you're just doing your best, you know? So seeing wisely by zooming out and then treating what we find with compassion. And after we treat what we find with compassion, it's important to also practice letting go of the second arrow. So what do I mean by that? Real brief, second arrow, all it is, imagine you're walking through the forest, you get shot with an arrow, right? The second arrow is this thing that happens where when you get shot with an arrow, the first thing you think is, where did that come from? Who uses arrows anymore? This is a really nice arrow. I wonder what kind of feathers they're using. You just start to proliferate and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to afford this? I don't have health insurance. Like all this stuff starts to come up when you've been shot with this arrow. And so that proliferation keeps us from actually tending to the wound, right? So that is the second arrow. So letting go of this story associated with the pain. So the reason I bring this up, because how many times do you, I feel like this has happened to me recently, like I've gotten, I was at Dose the other day, and the parking spots are really small, right? And I pulled into the parking spot, and the person next to me was like a little too far over to the right, so I went to open my door, and I kind of dinged their thing a little bit, and I was like, oh no. And then I got out of the car, I like kind of got out of the car and went into the coffee shop, and I'm sitting with my friend, and a man comes up to me and he goes, hey, just so you know, it's customary that when you hit someone's car that you apologize and you acknowledge it. And in the moment I'm like, oh no, so the second arrow starts to come up, like, I'm the worst, I hit their car, like, because apparently he was in it, and I was like, oh no, I didn't know that, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have totally like done something, I didn't do something. If you are that man and you are in here right now, I'm so sorry. And so I'm talking with my friend, and I keep being like, man, that really like made me mad. I'm like, that really, like, I was like, oh, you just need to feel powerful, blah, blah, blah. You need to tell, like, the small lesbian lady that she did something wrong. And it's just funny to see how the second arrow, instead of just being like, oh, embarrassment is present. And tending to that little pit in my stomach, and being like, oh, little bunny, it's okay. It's all right. Instead, I want a second arrow. That to be said, if he came up to me and started calling me names and being angry, I would have been a little bit more, Mikey also says, do no harm, take no shit, right? And so, doesn't mean we're a doormat. Right? But tending to the second arrow is important, because when you start to get angry or mad, and maybe not practicing patience, you get angry with yourself, which perpetuates anger. So cultivating wisdom helps us zoom out and see. Compassion helps us honor and bear witness to. And then dropping the second arrow ensures that we do not perpetuate suffering. Those are the 3 things you can practice today. I'm going to close out with another reading from this book because it's so good. He says, patience may at first strike you as a teeth-gritting, hang on until it's over quality. But this would not be perfect patience, because in such a case, the mind is still longing for the end of experience. Aversion has not been relinquished. Perfect patience has the soft and heartful strength of having all the time in the world to rest in an experience. It relaxes the edge of time. The transformative power of patience is such that as the mind relaxes its defensiveness and bristling, the annoying delay becomes an occasion for spaciousness. And the other person's irritating behavior is something you can meet with empathy as their unfortunate problem. Naturally, it also includes the wisdom to know what one just has to bear with, and when there is an occasion, to act in a clear and responsible way. Patience is not meant to transform you into a doormat, but to act as a fire break on immediate impulses that will not bring around your welfare. And as our conditioning is often one of getting things done as quickly as possible, it's skillful to check that attitude with wisdom.
What's up, y'all? Reverend Mikey Noshel here from Wild Heart Meditation Center in Nashville, Tennessee. Thanks for checking us out. Do me a favor, please like and subscribe. And if you feel moved to leave a donation, you can do so at wildheartmeditationcenter.org or the Venmo link in the description. Peace and love.